Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Mark Andrews, all the way from Georgia, where it's very hot. It's hot in the UK, so it's unusual for us, and it's unusual for you. You were saying, Mark, for it to be sticky and hot and sticky this early on.
Yeah, absolutely. This early, first day of summer, we're already into late July weather.
Yeah. So yeah, we're recording this on the 21st of June. It'll probably go out July, August, maybe. So it's probably even stickier now, though, as you listen to this, dear listeners. So Mark is the founder and director of Adoptive Family Resources, and he's also an adoptive dad. He's got a 35-year-old son, him and his wife, and a 27-year-old daughter. That's one of the things that we talked about from last time. So welcome to the show, Mark. Mark, thank you for making time for us today.
Well, thanks, Simon, for having me. I'm excited. Thank you.
So one of the things that we talked about last time in our little pre-podcast chat was helping adoptees see their ironclad value. That's what I scribbled down at the end of our conversation. And what we're talking about here really is the ultimate in terms of self-esteem, seeing our worth, not an end to questioning our self-worth. And from what I've been exploring this area with adoptees and non-adoptees for the last 13 years, I found it's one of the biggest issues that we all have. What makes it different for adoptees is as adoptees, we have sometimes a compelling logic to believe that we are not good enough because we were, to use perhaps an emotional topic, an emotional word, given away or relinquished, and that is perhaps one of the biggest, the underlying challenge that I've faced in my life, and one which I've heard other adoptees and adoption professionals point out. What do you make of all that?
Well, Simon, I think you're right on. I think for every human being, that question of who am I, we all wrestle with that and explore that. It's not like we ask that question verbatim to ourselves growing up, but that's part of growing up, is establishing identity, which usually comes along around puberty and early adolescence. But I believe, and just kind of, with my own experience with our children, that question for adoptees is multi-layered. I recall when I was writing my doctoral dissertation, my daughter, who's now 27, and she was probably early 20s at the time, said, "Dad, make sure that you put a section in there about identity." And that really struck me. I thought, that's interesting that she would say that, but it makes a lot of sense that she would say that, because that's the core issue there. And the reason I say it's multi-layered, because it's for the adoptee, excuse me, it's figuring out who they are, not just in a traditional way, but who am I now that for our kids anyway, who are adopted from India, it's who am I in this country? Who am I? Who am I as a person of color with white parents? Who am I in this strange new world? Where do I fit? And I think for any adoptee, I think maybe more so in some ways for the inter-country adoptee, but for all adoptees, that question is multi-layered. And as you said, Simon, it's also tied directly into excuse me, those feelings, for lack of a better term, those feelings of abandonment, relinquishment, whatever word we want to use, that's in that, why was I given up? And what does that say about me? It means that I am less than. It means that I am not enough. And I think that's a struggle, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a struggle for every adoptee. Those core questions that all center on who am I and where do I fit in this world?
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Is there any way that you could kind of summarize what you feel that those layers are? Because I agree it's multi-layered, but the question that came to my mind, well, what are the layers?
Mm-hmm. I guess what I meant, Simon, by layers are those questions. Maybe, I don't know if layers is the best word for it, but those questions that I know that our kids went through, some of those in their own mind internally and also externally, where they were verbalized. I guess what I would term layers are those questions that they wrestle with. As I mentioned earlier, who am I in this country? Where do I fit? Why was I given up? That's kind of what I'm pointing towards as far as layers. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't have my own view on those layers would be perhaps slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
I would say perhaps I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with there's more complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if you looked at, and this is just my lived experience as a white guy, as a white baby adopted
Mm-hmm.
by white parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the layer of complexity of the transracial piece,
Mm-hmm.
like your kids do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but you've got another layer. You've got a race layer, perhaps
Right.
that's it. Perhaps race is a layer.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps culture is a layer.
Absolutely, that is
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
so for and there would be yeah. So I was adopted from well, yeah. My birth mother was English, and my parents are English.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have the cultural layer, but like maybe a white kid adopted from Russia
Uh-huh.
would have a culture. They wouldn't have the race. They wouldn't have the the color issue.
Mm-hmm.
But they would have the cultural issue.
Exactly.
So maybe, and then you've got the kind of your kids were what they were. Were they 5 and I've written it down here. They were 4.5 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
they've got the kind of the layer of complexity of what happened before they were adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I was only 5 weeks old, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I haven't got that kind of the period,
Mm-hmm.
the layer of the period of what happened is shorter,
Mm-hmm.
so it's simpler. And then you could also put the layer that we all adoptees apparently or allegedly suffer this primal wound layer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the layers could be race, culture, what happened pre-adoption, and the primal wound. So
Mm-hmm.
they could make up what those layers were.
Right.
It's interesting because I'd never thought of you use the layer, and I'm thinking, well, what are the layers? You see the layers as the questions, and I think maybe all those questions come from different parts of the layer. So
Right.
the race layer has loads of questions. The culture layer has loads of questions. The what happened, the pre-adoption occurrences questions, and then the primal wound questions.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps that's one way of
Mm-hmm.
looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to illustrate that. Yeah.
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 So what have you learned as both personally with your raising your own kids and professionally helping other adoptive parents? What have you learned about, I don't know, what do you do with a layer? You pierce a layer, you ask, you resolve the issues, you answer the questions that come up in the layer, you resolve the layers, you peel back the layers of the onion, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure which metaphor makes most sense for you there, but what have you learned addressing those layers, addressing those questions?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a deep question there. What have I learned? Um, I think, and I hope this is addressing that question, Simon. Again, I go back to the fact that we are parents, my wife and I, of kids from a different culture, a different skin tone. What I've learned is that um, when we adopted them, we had to understand that we immediately became a multi-ethnic, multiracial family. We weren't just white parents with Indian children. It's more than that.
Okay.
We are automatically a multi-ethnic family. And again, I hope I'm answering your question there. We've also had to remind ourselves, I like to use the saying that, we do not have their genes, which is obvious, but the fact that we don't, um, we have to understand and try to understand where they are coming from. A very, very foreign culture, a very foreign environment, and just being sensitive and aware to that. Even though, even to this day, even though both of our kids are fully Americanized. Our son's been with us since 1994. Our daughter's been with us since 1999. They are and always will be Indian. We also have to realize that, we, my wife and I, not being people of color, that that our kids are not going to automatically gravitate towards white people as their friends and peers. To my knowledge, and both of our children are not yet married, but to my knowledge, all of the people that my son and daughter have dated, my daughter's engaged now, all have been African American, and there's a reason for that. And so we had to, again, I'll speak for myself. I had to really do a shift in my mind that I could not assume that all of their, or most of their close relationships were going to be white people, because they're not. So I hope that kind of addresses that somewhat, because
Yeah.
I think that's one of those layers.
So I love the I loved what you started with. You said, well, we're immediately a multi-ethnic and multiracial family,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that came to mind was sometimes they serve cafe latte in a clear, like a clear triangular glass. Yeah, it's a bit like it looks like a bit like a cocktail glass rather than a solid ceramic cup. And you can see three levels. You can see three levels of you've got the kind of the foam at the top, then you've got a light brown, and then you've got a milk bit, haven't you? I think is that what it looks like? There's two or three layers anyway.
Right.
But you're a blended family, which is what happens if you stir that.
Right.
If you stir that latte up, right? But you are definitely not the white of the milk.
Right.
So yeah, on the color one. So yeah, the espresso goes in at the bottom, and then the milk goes in at the top, and they separate out, and then you stir them up. But you're definitely not all white. You're definitely not a separate. You're not in two layers. You are a blended family, and it's as one. So there's quite a big shift to you're no longer a white family with brown kids. You are a white parents with brown kids. You are a multi-ethnic and a multiracial family. Right. And that was a shift. That was a shift in the way that you saw it. And you also talked about a shift in assumptions. You talked about challenging your own assumptions. You couldn't be safe in your own. You had to move your mindset on. Your mindset had to move on in terms of, you talked about the dating. So what we're talking about here is shifts,
right,
in how you think,
right,
how shifts in how you think. I'm talking about shifts in how I think. So in any relationships, it's about how we see the relationship rather than about our kids.
Yeah, I've had to continually or often, Simon, looking outside of myself, to try to understand the best I can. And I know we're kind of gravitating here more towards, international adoptees because that's our world. But I've had to try to intentionally empathize, understand the world that my children have come from, and the world that they experience here in the deep South. I recall back, I guess my son was in third grade, and he's not one to, he's just kind of a happy-go-lucky guy, and he always has been, even as a child. But I remember him coming home from school one day with tears in his eyes, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with him. I said, what happened? What happened? Well, he said, this little boy at school, evidently they were in an argument or something like that, or an altercation. He said, this other boy told me that I need to go back to my country where I came from. And that really angered me because I wanted to go down to that school and find that other kid and drop kick him. But for the first time, and again, this all, I think, all goes back to this identity thing. For the first time, I felt kind of second hand. I felt just a little tiny bit of what he felt as far as feeling racial prejudice. And, the little boy who told him that was actually Black. And so that little guy, the other little guy probably had heard that from somebody else. But that really got my antenna up about, what our kids as people of color may have to deal with here in the Deep South. I mean, my son has been, he's admitted to me that he's been stopped before by the police, and felt pretty strongly that was because of the color of his skin. And the police were very cordial to him once he showed them his driver's license that showed that he's a veteran Marine. He said they changed their tune when they saw that. So again, I think that all ties into this identity thing too, of, who am I? Why am I treated this way? And that's been difficult at times for both, especially our son, but our daughter also, growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. We watch a lot of, well, a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours telly a night, and watch a lot of cop shows,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of American shows, and I think a lot of cops used to be Marines, so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
they respect the Marines. Interesting when you talk about the different sorts of racial prejudice, because so my school was 98% white, some or probably 95% white, maybe 3% Asian, 2% black, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember there was an Indian guy, and I was probably not much older than your son when I heard him say this, but he expressed some racial prejudice against Pakistanis,
Mm-hmm.
and it was my earliest kind of as a guy living in a white culture,
Mm-hmm.
that was a shock. That was a shock to me, and he was probably the most racist person that I'd come across. I hadn't come across anybody who was a white person who was as prejudiced against black people as this Indian guy was towards Pakistani people. So it comes in all shapes. Well, it comes in all colors, isn't it? And
It
it's
sure
all
does.
to do with threat, isn't it? It's all to, especially here in the UK. We left Europe with this Brexit thing because the politicians promised safer jobs for whites, or safer jobs for British people if there was less immigration, shorter queues for healthcare if there was less immigration, and neither of those two things had anything to do with Brexit, right? And that so it gets stirred up with by the people in power, because they know how to push our buttons and how to make other people different. So clearly, this is really deep stuff, and for me, underneath all those questions, so you've got the question of who am I, and you've got another question, which is, am I good enough? Why was I given away, relinquished, abandoned, not raised by my birth family? What have you learned about addressing that question?
Yeah, that's another deep one, Simon. Am I good enough? Right. That's that. Am I good enough? And I would say that again, like most all adoptees, our kids have have struggled with that. And there's no, there's no easy strategy or answer to this, and in helping our kids to come to helping any adoptee come to a resolve on this. For us, as people of faith, we are people of faith. We are Christian people. We for our kids, I've really put that in the context of the fact that there is a God who gives unconditional love to all, and that that grace and that love, I think, helps to address that question. Is that mom and dad love you, accept you unconditionally.
Yeah.
God, your heavenly Father God, loves you unconditionally. So for those of us who are people of faith, putting it into that context, I think has helped our kids. I think for some adoptees, Simon, this is in some ways a lifelong struggle, where it's attached to performance, drive, and again, that can be true for any person, adopted or not. But adoptees that I have met who have come to a resolve of that question have, and again, there's no magic switch that gets turned where they just say, okay, now I am good enough. It's not like that. It's a process where they have relationships with people who affirm them, both, people of their color, people of not their color, people who affirm them, people who support them, who in different ways in relationships say, yes, you're okay. You're okay, just how you are. It wasn't okay how this all came down. But you're okay as who you are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not a person of faith. However, I do believe that the biggest, you said there's no switch to this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a gradual process of revealing.
Mm-hmm.
Revealing, remembering, forgetting, remembering
Mm-hmm.
again, forgetting, and remembering again.
Yeah.
So it's like falling down the stairs. It's like and it gets there's some bumps, but you as we go deeper, we see better.
Yeah.
So I do think that this is about, and I hesitate on this one. It's more about faith than it is about psychology.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
And when we were talking about layers before, one of my little metaphors came to life here. So if we can, and it's the peeling back the layers of the onion was the kind of the metaphor that came to mind. So and this is the outer layer of the onion is what's happened to us, but that's not who we are.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
The next one underneath the layer of the next layer underneath it is how we feel, our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
how we feel about what happened to us.
Mm-hmm.
But those kind of come and go, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that has been for our children. Yes.
So anything that comes and goes isn't essential to us. It's not
Mm-hmm.
innate. It's not baked in. It's
Mm-hmm.
it comes and goes. The
Mm-hmm.
feelings, when the feeling goes, we're still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we take off our shirt, we're still underneath the shirt, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if we see the feelings as something that comes and goes like a shirt,
Mm-hmm.
so that can't be who we are. And then the next level of the next layer of the onions is the thoughts. So you could say one of the feelings could be insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a thought that goes with that is the questions you were talking about and that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Am I good enough? Am I enough?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next layer of the onion, because we're going deeper,
Mm-hmm.
it is the thing, the person, the entity that's having those thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
feeling those feelings, and to which these that went through these events. And
Right.
and so we're not what happened to us. We're not the feelings in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we're not the feelings in our hearts. We're
Mm-hmm.
not the thoughts in our head. So we're left with, well, what are we then? What is this identity thing?
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way I can explain that is a French philosopher. I often quote this guy, and I never remember exactly how to pronounce his name. He said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the human experience are the events, the feelings, and the thoughts, but we're that spirit. This is why I kind of, because of your background and your faith and your qualification, we're the spirit that all this stuff happens to, and that's who we truly are. That's the perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And to simplify this yet further, I use a mentor of mine's metaphor, a diamond in horse poop. Yeah,
Diamond in the rough.
diamond in the rough.
Yes.
So the horse poop consists of the poopy events that happen to us,
Mm-hmm.
like losing our birth parents, the poopy feelings that we have, such as insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and the poopy thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
That am I good enough thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that poop, the 3 layers of poop there, obscures, but it doesn't change
Right.
the essence and the brilliance of who we
Right.
truly are, which is
Right.
the diamond
Mm-hmm.
obscured by the horse poop.
Yep. I like that. It's very a very vivid and a very vivid picture.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
that's, that's the, I think for me, that's the essence of
Mm-hmm.
it all. But understanding the nuances of that and getting to the point to express it like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, and me seeing that for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, I see it, then I don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I see it, I see it. I know it's like, it's like a tightrope.
Yeah.
I know the safety net is
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
I've fallen, and I know the safety net is there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm less afraid of walking the tightrope of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
tricky emotion. So that's why, for me, this is about, the faith, the spirit stuff, rather than the psychology. It's prior to, it's beyond the psychology, or it's before the psychology, it's beyond the psychology, it's deeper, it's underneath all that.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right on there, Simon. Whether the adoptee is a person of faith or not, it does come down to an issue of that leap of faith. And again, I'm not an adoptee, but in my own observation for adoptees that I've worked with, it does come down, whether or not they are a person of faith, it does come down to an issue of faith. Even if they don't believe in God, it comes down to an issue of faith that despite all of this, I'm okay. I'm okay as who I am. I have no control over what did happen to me in the past, the relinquishment, the abandonment. I have no, the adoptees that I have worked with and seen who really have made that identity transition well in a healthy way are the ones who have been able to come to that point of faith where they said, despite all of this, I'm okay as who I am. I'm okay as who I am. And I think also those are the people who have had a really strong support system around them, beginning with parents, with their circle of friends, with the help of counseling, support groups, whatever. The people who have been able to make that jump of faith, if you will, about identity are also the people who have had a really strong support village around them that has consistently affirmed them. And I know that's been true for us. I think even though both of our children still, I think, struggle, like you said, it comes and goes, it comes and goes. Even though both of our kids, I think, occasionally struggle with that "who am I" question, even as adults, I think what has brought them along a long way has been, and we're thankful for this, is the strong support system of people around them, people that they can trust. If you have people around you that you can trust, those are also people that you believe what they say is true, not just by what they say, but by their actions. And when I think about the support that we have gotten, that our children have gotten from our community of support, our immediate family, our extended family,
Yeah,
our church family, others who have, uh, different groups who have consistently shown by their, not just by their words, but by their actions, primarily by their actions. Not that they're colorblind, because there's no such thing as colorblindness. It's not like they just see our kids as, like I said, as Indian kids with white parents, but people who have really honored our kids' culture, who have really honored their struggle. That support system has helped them to, in large part, to come to a point, say, I'm okay just as I am. And I don't think any adoptee can come to that leap of faith in isolation by themselves.
No.
They can't do that. You've got to have those, we talked about layers earlier, they've got to have those layers of support that continually, consistently, and this is what our children have gotten over the past 3 decades, that continual reinforcement. Yes, we know that you are different, we know that, but you are okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. And that's what really has made a difference, I think, in the lives of our kids. And even, like I say, they still, it comes and goes. There's still some struggles there. And I think for most adoptees, not all, but most adoptees, whether it's, intercountry or not, there's always going to be, some of those little issues that kind of rear their heads once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, the kids take their lead from their parents, right?
They sure do. Mm-hmm.
So how you see your kids, your faith in their okayness,
mm-hmm.
is going to be the biggest,
mm-hmm.
one of the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest or one of the biggest drivers of their own perception
Absolutely.
of their own okayness. And what came to my mind as I was listening to you was the Oprah and Bruce Perry, is it, have done it's not this book, or I was looking at it on Audible. I think I'm going to buy it. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happens. It's what's happened to you.
Exactly.
Something like that. So what's happened to you is the poop is on the poop layer. It's not the diamond layer. So the more clearly that you can see, and you, dear listeners, the more you can see your kids' okayness, is the clearer you can see that, the more significant a driver of your own behavior that's going to be. So the clearer that you can see it, the clearer you've got it, sorry, I'm struggling with this. The clearer you can see it for yourself, the better able you're going to be able to point it out to your kids, and the more likely they are to see it for themselves, because they have to see it for themselves. It's a insight. It's a sight from within. It's not the penny drops. The penny drops for us first, and for the people that we love second. But we have to help that penny drop. It's not what we say, it's what they hear. And it's not what we point at, it's what they see.
Right.
What, to me, when I say that, it almost seems too easy. And what do you make of all that? What do you make of this insight stuff that I'm talking about? And helping the kids see this stuff for themselves.
So I'm sorry, say that last part again. When the kids see,
helping kids see stuff for themselves, because what we want the kids to see is their perfection, their essence of their essential nature as the diamond, that has been through some poop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They have to see that for themselves, right?
Well, they do. They do. And that's, again, that's not an overnight process. That comes through a lot of
No.
bumps and bruises, if you will,
Yeah.
emotionally.
And yeah, I mean,
Either.
I've been looking at this for 13 years, and I continue to look at it.
Mhm.
You referred earlier on about to curiosity and challenging. You talked about consistently challenging your own thinking.
Mhm.
I think there's this idea that it's a one and done, and it's lifelong. This is lifelong learning stuff. This
It
is,
sure is.
and
Mm.
we talked about this before I started recording. The fact that we all have off days, right? And if we can
Mhm.
be, I had an adoptee on the show last year, and I talked about, so what comes to your mind when you hear this phrase, thriving adoptees? And she said, well, I don't think I'm thriving.
Mhm.
And it transpired that her view of thriving was never feeling down.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's just humanly impossible.
Right. Right. Right.
but
For any
we're,
of us, yeah.
sorry, for all of
For
us,
any of us,
for
yeah.
any of us,
Mhm.
if we can be okay with
Mhm. Mhm.
not feeling okay, we're always okay.
Mhm. And I think along with that, Simon, it takes me back to one of the main sections that I wrote in my dissertation a few years back, and I'm hoping this is going to be in a, you talked about a book earlier. I'm hoping to write a book on this, but I think another one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle here for adoptees, especially adoptees that have had no memory or no contact or connection at all with birth parents, as is true with our children, is a big piece of coming to resolve is being able to deal with this thing called ambiguous loss. Loss, that's really, there was an adoption researcher that talked about, that loss is really kind of I think she called the hub of the wheel. Everything that adoptees struggle with emanates from loss. I think her name was Deborah Silverstein. She wrote an article on this decades ago. And I think and this is part of the identity process too, the who am I process. I think for adoptees who have, and this is true of many, especially international adoptees, of having no connection, no memory of birth parents, they have to wrestle and deal with this ambiguous loss, which is loss without any closure.
Yeah.
Typically when there's a loss in life, whether it's the death of a family member or the loss of a job, the loss of health through chronic illness or whatever, people typically at some point over time, sometimes a long time, come to a point of resolve that, okay, this person is gone now. My job is gone now. I have, I close the door. I don't forget about it, but I'm moving on.
Okay.
I'm moving on. And I think for many adoptees, that's much easier said than done because their losses are ambiguous. There was no healthy closure to that. And that's a traumatic thing. And I think that also feeds into the identity, to the who am I thing. Because as human beings, our identity is tied into our parents. And so there's a huge chasm there for many adoptees who have had no connection, no knowledge of who their birth parents were, if there are no records or whatnot. is, it's like my daughter mentioned, and she gave me permission to say this because I put it in the dissertation. She said there's not a day that doesn't go by that that I don't think about, my birth parents. Who were they? Are they still alive? As I think when I was talking with you pre-recording, when we were talking before, that movie Lion that came out several years ago, a powerful movie, and my kids both went to see that, and I asked them what they thought about it, and my son said, "Dad, it was a good movie, but it was not realistic." Of course, the movie was based on a real life account where the Indian son, through this elaborate Google search, found his birth mother in this remote village in India. And he said, but my son said, "Dad, that was a great movie, but it's not realistic." And he was right about that. It was, because that was a needle in a haystack event. And he said, most adoptees like us, we'll never know.
No.
And I think for particularly for intercountry adoptees, but even for domestic adoptees who don't know and never will know, they have to come to that resolve that will always be ambiguous. Yes, I did
Yeah.
have birth parents. I don't know who they are. I will probably never know who they are. And how do I move on from that?
So I think that loss is a huge part of the poop.
Huge, and maybe the biggest part.
And folk, what we, that's why focusing, and it's unresolved. If it's unresolvable, then it's just gonna eat at us.
Yeah.
And I think I can only talk about my own experience here. So if I look at two causes of two pieces of poop in my life, right? I can talk about business. Running the family business caused me a lot of poop, and adoption has also caused me some poop. With the business stuff, I just doubled down to improve the business. And then after so many years, when I figured, okay, I'm at the end of, I've done all I can do. I'm out of ideas. I sold the business. With what I felt really tricky with the adoption stuff is you can't change it. You can't be unadopted.
Right. Right.
So if we make loss the hub of the wheel, then that wheel is never going to run at full speed, because there's a weakness there. There's a weakness there, and I would never make so it's a fact if it's a foundation, yeah. So I'm jumping around the metaphors. I would never focus on something that I couldn't change. I couldn't see clearly. It as you say, it's a black hole, right? So I'm never going to find peace in a black hole. I'm never going to find solid ground in a black hole, because that's not what black holes are about. They're about vacuums, aren't they? I think I'm not a sci-fi fan, but if we focus on the loss, which we can't change, if we focus on the poop, then we're going nowhere.
Exactly.
We got to focus on the faith, the self-worth, the ironclad value, the diamondness, the perfection, all the support stuff that you talked about. That's where we need to focus our Yeah.
Mhm.
It's about faith. It's about belief.
Mhm.
It's not about trying to solve an unsolvable conundrum.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, Simon, that there are some, and I know we've kind of taken off on a different topic here, maybe in talking about loss, but I think it's all interconnected, of course. But I think there are some practical things that adoptive parents can do to help their adopted children in this area. And that's number one, being a good listener is so important, being a good listener. Sometimes this is what our children need, is just somebody to listen, but there are practical things. I remember 3 or 4 years ago on Mother's Day, both my wife and I, both of our moms are gone now, passed away. On Mother's Day, we took our kids, and we got 4 colored helium balloons. And we walked down to this golf course, which is near our home here in the open space, and had a prayer for our mothers, and just talked about mothers, and we released those balloons.
Yeah.
And that was a powerful thing for our kids. I think that really, and I often talk, that was about 4 years ago we did that. And I thought, that's something we should do every year, because I think that really helped them to chip away at some of that ambiguity. That balloon, that little ceremony was a tangible way, because ambiguity is not tangible. It was a tangible way to put um, to put some reality on. Yes, we have, for our kids, we have birth mothers too. We don't know if they're still alive or not, but this is for them.
Yeah.
And that was, so there are some, I think, tangible things that we can do for our adopted kids who have had no connection with their parents. And again, that's all part of this "who am I" question.
Yeah.
Writing letters is a common thing. Writing letters to the birth parents. There are some tangible things that don't, certainly don't answer all the questions, but I think there's some tangible things that can help to take the, I don't say take the edge off, but can kind of help to have some resolve in that ambiguity. I know, Simon, that for both of my children, that often, if not daily, as my daughter mentioned, there will be that wonderment and that gnawing inside that, I wonder where they are. I remember when I did my dissertation, I interviewed 30 or 40 adoptees. One young lady from India went back to India to visit, which is another practical way to address this. But she said, I was wondering if I was going to see a woman on the street that looked like me, and wondering if that was my mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's a beautiful, that balloon, 4 balloons, and you're empathizing with their loss,
Mm-hmm.
and that and empathy and listening and making it okay.
Yeah.
Making it okay,
Mm-hmm.
showing your vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
about your loss, expressing your own loss.
Right.
I think it's a beautiful thing to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, I hope I haven't negated the loss element. I just felt when I felt that unresolvable loss,
Mm-hmm.
I felt totally disempowered.
Mm-hmm.
I felt stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I felt unable in that, whilst that feeling lasted. I felt unable to move forward. And that's why I think we all get stuck. Sometimes. That's the degree of stuck, isn't it? Being stuck with something,
right.
Stuck with a feeling until it goes.
Right.
So this has been. I've really enjoyed this, Mark. I got a feeling that I put a bit too much of my stuff in it halfway through, but I had to express it because it was this layers thing, and you really helped me. You really helped me see the layers. You gave me another model for the layers of culture, race, pre-adoption trauma, and primal wound as separating this out into the different layers, and then separating it out into the layers of, well, we're not what happened to us, we're not our feelings of insecurity, we're not our thoughts of I'm good enough, with that the diamond that's been through all that poop, that's thought all those poopy thoughts and felt all those poopy feelings.
Well, I appreciate the time, Simon. It's been a great experience and to do this and to meet you from across the pond.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me, you never know who's going to connect with your website and give you a call.
Yeah. So talking about websites, as always, dear listeners, I'd urge you to check out what Mark's doing. There is a link to his organization and the social media channels in the show notes to this episode. I always build them in, so check them out and connect with Mark. He's a great guy, and especially I think if you're coming from if you're a person of faith and you want to bring that in. I know you've done a lot of work with CAFO, haven't you? Is that how the press CAFO? Yeah. So if that is a huge dimension that you bring to this work, and good luck with the book.
Thanks so much, Simon. It's a long work in progress, but I'm slowly getting there. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, and we'll speak to you again very soon. Bye-bye.